We start with a quiz. If y is inversely proportional to x and y equals 16 when x equals 4, then what is y when x equals 6? Okay. And then we have f of x equals 4x plus 12. We want to find f inverse of x. We want to find the formula for f inverse of x. Well, we're going to start with the proportionality. Inverse proportionality, we have to know that that's y equals k over x. Inverse proportionality, the first thing that you got to understand about that is that if x is bigger, y gets smaller. That's inverse. Whereas with the direct proportionality, if x gets bigger, y gets bigger. So some people work this with a y equals kx. Now that's not the right proportionality to use, but people that did work it with the direct proportionality worked it correctly. If it had been a direct proportionality, that would have been right. Okay, but you have to know what inverse proportionality means. You have to know these terminologies. And then proportional to x squared or inversely proportional to x cubed or the square root of x. The terminology is pretty straightforward. So I'll go over that a little bit more, but let's just work this one out. Inverse proportionality, y equals k over x. Y equals 16 when x equals 4. So we get 16 equals k over 4. We solve for k. We get k equals 64. Okay. So again, take our information, y equals 16 when x equals 4, and plug it in to our proportionality equation. If we've got the right proportionality equation, it's a very easy step. And then we solve for k. Now we're going to multiply both sides by 4. We're going to get k equals 64. Then we rewrite with k equals 64, we get y equals 64 over x. And then find y for x equals 6. Y equals 64 over 6, which reduces down to 32 over 3, which, if you wish, is 10 2/3. So we see that x is going to change from 4 to 6, which means x is going to get a little bigger. That means y is going to get proportionally smaller. Y is 16. If you work through this, you find that when x goes from 4 to 6, y will go from 16 down to 10 2/3. Now, I think there was an error I saw in one paper in evaluating k, but you've got 16 equals k over 4. You multiply both sides by 4, and it gives you k equals 64. So let me write out that step. You multiply both sides by 4. Because you have a division, k is divided by 4, you multiply both sides by 4. And that gives you 64 equals K, which you're generally going to write as K equals 64. Okay. So procedure, look good. Be sure we're getting the algebra right. Okay. Now, we have this function f of x equals 12 and want to find the inverse function. So the first thing you think when you have an inverse function is swap x and y. Well, before we swap x and y, we got to have a y. Well, y equals f of x. So y equals 4x plus 12. Solve for y. Well, again, let's go ahead and write out y equals 4x plus 12. Not necessary, but since I put that heading in there, I want to get everything right here. Y equals 4x plus 12. We're going to add negative, okay, swap. Okay, wait a minute. I said solve for y, which is what we do after we swap. We didn't swap. Let me write it down correctly. Very important. Swap x and y. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere. Okay? So y becomes x, and x becomes y. So now we see y is now an x, and x is now a y. And now we solve for y. Well, again, I'll write it out. X equals 4y plus 12. So we're going to add 12 to both, or subtract 12 from both sides. And the way I really want to see you do this so that you're getting it right is you write out the equation 12 equals negative 12. Then you add these two equations, which gives you x minus 12 equals 4y plus 12 minus 12. And I really strongly advocate that you write it out like this. So which gives you x minus 12 just equals 4y, since 12 minus 12 is 0. Now, I've seen cases where people are mixing up subtracting 12 with multiplying by negative 12, okay? Don't mix that up, okay? Just don't do it and get in the habit of writing these things out in this form. That should correct that sort of error. In any case, we want to get y. Well, I'm going to write this as 4y equals x minus 12, because when we're solving for y, we usually want y to be in the left side. And we can, switch the two sides. If x minus 12 equals 4y, then 4y equals x minus 12. They're the same. Then we divide both sides by 4. Well, 4y divided by 4 is just y. So we get y equals x minus 12 over 4. Now I think somebody here solved this problem, okay? And I think they got half of it right, but they wrote this out. Well, let's okay, y equals x minus 4. So that f inverse of x equals x minus 12 over 4, okay? Now somebody got this problem pretty much right, but entered the answer as x minus 12 over 4, or something like that. Okay? That's not x minus 12 over 4. Which is x minus 12 fourths. Because in the order of operations, the 4 only divides the negative 12. Okay? Should be written with parentheses around the x minus 12, so that the whole x minus 12 is your numerator. Okay? So be sure you're aware of that distinction, because it looks like whoever did that got these steps pretty much right. You had x minus 12 over 4, but you didn't group the x minus 12. So open math said, nah, it's not what I'm looking for. Okay? So be careful about that. The order of operations, make sure you use parentheses where they're needed. Okay, now, last time, I don't want to take time to write it out because we need to move on, but last time, I believe I wrote out across from this part of the board that y directly proportional to x means y equals kx. Y inversely proportional to x means y equals k over x. And then I wrote a couple of other proportionalities, y proportional to x squared, and so forth. I did want to talk about joint proportionality, which I didn't talk about last time. We kind of refer back to that video if necessary, and make sure you know what these various proportionalities are. It's a pretty easy system once you understand what direct and inverse proportionality looks like. Okay. Say y varies jointly directly with x inversely with y squared. And y equals 36 when x equals 4 and y equals 3. Gonna do that much, okay? Now, they simply have to know what directly means. Y directly with x would be the one that everybody's familiar with. That would be y equals kx. And I said y varies inversely with y squared. It should be z squared. Careless with my variables. Okay, y inversely with z squared. Y inversely with z would be y equals k over z squared. So y varying jointly with x and the inverse square of z could be written as y equals kx over z squared. Now the k you would get here if you used x equals 4 and put this wrong. Okay. Again, y equals 36 when x equals 4 and z equals 3. Now, if you took the x equals 4 and the y equals 36 here, you'd get a different value of k than you would if you used y equals 36 and z equals 3 here. So this would give you a different k than this one, but when you write it jointly, you get a still different k. So what do we do with this? Well, write it again. Y equals kx over z squared. Y equals 36 when x equals 4 and z equals 3. Then we just plug these numbers in. We get 36 equals k times 4 over 3 squared. So you get 36 equals 4 times k over 9. We multiply both sides. By 9/4. We get 9/4 of 36 equals 9/4 of 4k. 9/4 of 4k over 9. Now, if I multiply the right-hand side out, 9 times 4 is 36. 4 times 9 is 36. So you have 36 divided by 36. Or you can just see that 9 is a factor of the denominator and 9 is a factor of the numerator. So they divide out. 4 is a factor of the denominator. 4 is a factor of the numerator. They divide out. So that leaves us k. On this side, we have 9 times 36 over 4. Well, that's easy to calculate. 81. Now we write y equals kx over z squared. With k equals 81. So y equals 81x over z squared. And there's our equation. Now I didn't say let's find y when z equals 6 and x equals 12, okay? But if I did, I could put then z equals 6 and x equals 12 in here and I get a value of y, okay? In other words, just like with a regular direct proportionality, but I've got an x and a z. So what you have to do to interpret this, first you have to know what inversely means. It means you're going to use k over something, right? Then you have to know inversely with what. If it's inversely with z squared, then it's going to be k over z squared. Now, if it's directly with x, it's going to be like k times x. You put them together and you get k times x over z squared. So you need to process that and work out just a little more. Everybody did fairly well until they got up to joint variation, which I didn't go over last time. Figured that, with what we went over last time, open math would make this clear. That turns out not to have been the case, so here it is. And if you do that assignment, by the time we get back on the half credit page, I'll give you whatever credit you make. There won't be just half credit. I'll transfer it over for full credit. Alternatively, I might change the date on it so you can still work on it, but I think not. I think I'm going to ask you to go to the half credit page. When the assignments were due today, they were all done partially correctly, but I think everybody, well, it depends. Depends on what you made. I'll write you an individual note in your homework. So check notes in your open math. A lot of times you're going to need a little more practice, and you can go to the half credit site and practice. All right. Now we need to move on. So let me pause for a second. Now let me pause. Okay. One thing I want everybody to do kind of quickly is sketch a graph showing a line through the points 2, 7 and 9, 3. Okay. I'm going to draw a set of coordinate axes. My points are in the first quadrant. X is positive and Y is positive. So I'm going to draw the axis so I have more room in the first quadrant. Okay, well, biggest X coordinate is 9. So I'm going to sketch a line over here indicating that on this line, X equals 9. Then I'm going to draw a line for X equals 2. Now, 2 is 1/4 of 8, so it's a little less than 1/4 of 9. Half of 9 would be there, and half of that would be there. So I think X equals 2 might be about here. I could draw marks. There's 1, 2, and I've got 7 between here and here, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's not very even. Okay, so if you marked off 9 equally spaced points here, you probably have a more accurate graph than I have. My X equals 2 should have been a little closer to the Y-axis. Then the biggest Y coordinate is 7. So I'm going to say Y equals 7 up here. And Y equals 3 is a little less than half of 7. So my line Y equals 3 would be here. And my 2 points would be like here. Now we want to find the slope. Well, let's first sketch the line. It's fairly good. Okay, so let's see if everybody can get the slope. Slope is rise divided by run. You seen that before? Rise divided by run? Maybe not. Okay, but let's define what I mean by rise and run. We start at this point and go straight across. We hit the line where x equals 9, which of course is the line above this point. Let's go ahead and label these points. First point is 2, 7. The second point is 9. Yeah, it's 9, 3. Okay, if we go across here with an arrow starting at this point and moving to the right until we're right above or below the second point, and then continue that with an arrow down to the second point, then this arrow, the horizontal arrow represents the run, and the vertical arrow represents the rise. Now, how far do we go? How far is it along the run? Okay. How long is this arrow? And does it go in the positive or negative direction? What do you think the run is? And what do you think the rise is? So you can write run equals and rise equals, and then figure out the number. So everybody got good numbers, but not everybody drew arrows. Okay, you have to draw arrows so you know whether these things are positive or negative. There's a formula that guarantees you'll always get it right, but that doesn't give you a picture. We want both a picture and a formula. So the run goes from x equals 2 to x equals 9. And of course, you could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the positive direction. But to get the run from 2 to 9, you subtract the 2 from the 9. You subtract where you end up from where you start. Subtract where you start from where you end up. If you do the same thing with the rise, you start at 7, you end up at 3. So you do 3 minus 7, which is negative 4. Why is the rise negative 4? It's because the arrow is pointing down, so you're ending up at 3 while starting at 7. It's where you end up minus where you start. Now there's a formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I don't recommend that you use that formula without first drawing the picture. You can use the formula without having any picture in your mind at all, okay? So you want to draw this picture. And then what I recommend is on your picture, you calculate slope equals rise divided by run, which is negative 4 over 7. You end up with the negative 4 over 7 right next to an arrow that goes directly from the first point to the last point. And you put a box around it. That's what I call a completely labeled fundamental triangle. This triangle is one of the most important objects that you're going to encounter in mathematics. And we want to have the picture of this triangle, which will do you a lot of good when you get to a calculus course or any other course that's based on this one. Okay. So by the formula, of course, y2 would be the y-coordinate of the second point, y1 would be the y-coordinate of the first point. That does give you 3 minus 9. And x2 would be the x-coordinate of the second point. x1 would be the x-coordinate of the first point. That would be 9 minus 2. And I said 3 minus 9 is 3 minus 7. y2 is 3, y1 is 7. And it gives us negative 4 over 9. Okay, slope is the first thing you need to understand about straight lines. Say that we have population of a county. I'll use fairly round numbers. $62,500 in 2006, $67,000 in 2020. Can you sketch me 2 points that represent this information? Well, I'm not going to push you to do that. I'm going to do it for you. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to say this point represents 2006, 62,500. Okay. Now, the point 2020, 67,000, 2020 is later than 2006. So if time is moving in this direction, to your point, well, I'm going to do a little more. The point 2006, 62,500 lies on the line x equals 2006, and the line y equals 62,500. Might be hard to read, but you understand. That's the y coordinate. Okay, if the line x equals 2006 is here, where's the line x equals 2020? Well, it's over here. Because 2020 is bigger than 2006. If the line y equals 62,500 is here, where would be the line 67,000? Well, it would be above that because it's 67,000 bigger than 62,000. So there's a line y equals 67,000. And here's the point. Two 2020, 67,000. Yeah. Can you give me the slope of the line between these points? Well, that's pretty easy to do. Simply draw an arrow from here to here, a horizontal arrow from the first point, failure directly below the second point in this case, then a vertical arrow up to the second point. And you do just what we did before. And I'd like to see you do this when you do some of these problems on the homework. Okay, draw it out like this. You write rise equals, you write run equals. Then you calculate the rise and the run. In this case, you could count the years. From 2006 to 2020 is 14 years, right? So your run is going to be 14, but let's write out the calculation. So your run is 14. Your rise is from 62,500 to 67,000. And I believe that's 4,500. Okay. So what's your slope? It's 67,500. No, it isn't. Writing down the number I see. It's rise over run. Let's be careful. The rise is 4,500. The run is 14. In this number, we can write in decimal form. Let's say 14 is going to go into 4,200 3 times, leaving 300. Goes into 300 about 22 times. So I think that's about 422. Now, my question is, what does this mean? So the slope of this. Oh, and I said 422. That's wrong. I think it's 322 approximately. You can calculate that on your calculator and correct my arithmetic in case it's wrong, which it sometimes is. Let's make that 3 a little bit clearer. Okay, slope was 4,500 over 14. What does that mean? It means change in population over number of years, right? The rise represents your change in population. The run represents how many years it took. If we write out what that really means, that's 4,500 people over 14 years, which is about 322 people per year. That's the average rate at which the population was changing with respect to time. Okay. It's the average rate of change of population. And that's pretty much all open math usually says. It's the average rate of change. Okay. They don't even use the word average a lot of times. I think it's pretty important to get used to this correct terminology. It's not that difficult. It's not the rate of change. The change is not 322 every year. Some years it might be 400, some years it might be 200. It's an average rate of change. You average the rates of change. So it's not the exact rate at which it changes every year. It's not the rate of change. It's the average rate of change. And it's the average rate of change of population. With respect to time. When you get to calculus, if you do end up with a calculus course, as many people do, at least an applied calculus course, one of the first things you learn to do is called derivatives, and they're rates of change of one thing with respect to another. You have this terminology very early in a calculus, so you might as well use the terminology here, because it's not a difficult terminology. So I prefer that you write out average rate of change of population with respect to time. And that's what this quantity here, this slope, represents. It's a very, very, very important concept. So think about it and give it as much attention as you can. Get in the habit of using this terminology. It'll start to make sense to you. Okay, probably already makes some sense, but it'll seep in to your brain in such a way that it'll be there when you really need it to be. Okay. Um, let's go back to our line. Here are the points 2, 7, and 9, 3. This line has the equation y equals mx plus b. Okay. Where m is its slope. So that's just something I'm going to tell you. And let's make sure I'm still recording. I am. Okay. Line has the equation y equals mx plus b for m is its slope. So equation is y equals -4/9 x plus b. 1 point is, now I'm going to let you choose. Thumb in this direction or thumb in this direction, okay? If your thumb's in this direction, I'm going to use this point. If your thumb's in this direction, I'm going to use this point. Which direction? Okay, we're going to use this point. It doesn't make a bit of difference unless the arithmetic is easier for 1 point than it is for the other, but probably not. Okay. 1 point is 9.3, and it turns out that the arithmetic really is easier for this point. Where x equals 9, y equals 3. Okay? So now our equation is y equals negative 4/9 x plus b, but x equals 9 and y equals 3. So we can replace x and y by 9 and 3. What we're saying here is with x equals 9, y equals 3, this equation becomes y 3 equals negative 4/9 of 9 plus b. Well, all we need to complete our equation is the value of b. Here's our equation. It'll apply to any x and y. Okay? In other words, a point xy is on the line if and only if it satisfies this equation. We want to solve for b, and then we have our equation. Solve for b. Well, let's rewrite the equation. 3 equals negative 4/9 times 9 plus b. Simplify. Well, 4/9 of 9, you got a 9 in the denominator and a 9 in the numerator of a fraction. The 9s divide out and you just end up with negative 4. 3 equals negative 4 plus b. And then we add 4 equals 4, giving us 3 plus 4 equals negative 4 plus b plus 4. Don't skip this step because I'm seeing mistakes in this step from some people in the class, okay? So adding 4 to both sides, we add the equation 4 equals 4 to the equation 3 equals negative 4 plus b, and we get 7 equals b. 3 plus 4 is 7. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0, and then we have the plus b. Thus, our equation is y equals negative 4/9 x plus 7. Now, the problem I have is I wrote down the wrong slope. This doesn't check out because 9 minus 2 is 7. My slope should have been 4/7, which I knew perfectly well, but I wrote down 4/9. We can correct that. 7s, 4/7. And then Should have been 4/7 x here and here. Incorrect. It didn't simplify that nicely, so let's just quickly correct the arithmetic. You understand the slope was 4/7, -4/7. We did that, then I wrote down -4/9. My excuse is you have both 9 and 7 as coordinates, but that's no excuse. We simplify this. No. Multiply both sides by 7, we get 7 times 3 equals 7 times -4/7 of 9 plus b. So we get 21. 7 times -4/7 is -4. And the 7 multiplies the b. So we get this equation. 21 equals -36 plus 7b. We add the equation 36 equals 36, and we get 57 equals 7b. So b is 57/7, which is 8 1/7. Now, these steps could be straightforward. If not, we need to practice solving straight lines. The point is getting the right equation, plugging in the x and the y values of one point gives us an equation we can solve for b. We solve that equation for b, and now our equation once we have b, we can write the equation. And then we can ask, does it make sense that b equals 8 1/7? If x equals 0, you get y equals 57/7, which is 8 1/7. That means the point where x is 0 should give you y equals 8 1/7. Well, that point is the y-intercept. Does it make sense that this point should be at 8 1/7? Well, this point is at y equals 7. So the line through this point ought to be y equals 8 1/7, and that looks about right. So chances are we did it correctly. Now, if we substitute 2, 7 into this equation, or let's say if x equals 2, y equals -4/7 of 2 plus 57/7 equals -8/7 plus 57/7. And I'm afraid this part of the board might not be completely visible. And that equals 49/7, which equals 7. So if x equals 2, y equals 7. Well, if x equals 2, y is supposed to equal 7. So we've checked that this equation works. Okay, now, if you missed this because the board wasn't on the camera, we got our solution, B equals 57/7, and everybody could see that. And then we take our equation, y equals -4/7 x plus b, we replace b by 57/7. There's the equation. We test the equation. There were 2 points. We used this point to find the equation. We're going to use this point to check to see if our equation is correct. We're going to substitute x equals 2 into the equation, which we've done here, and see if we don't get y equals 7. Well, if you do the arithmetic, you do get y equals 7. Okay? So the full circle is, we find the slope, we pick one of the points, well, we find the slope and we write y equals mx plus b, but m is the slope. We place the number in front of x is going to be the slope. Then we use the coordinates of one point or the other, plug them in, get an equation that we can solve for b so that we can complete the equation. Plug those coordinates in, solve for b, and then write out our equation. Then use the other point, plug in the x coordinate of that point, and verify that you get the y coordinate. Okay, well, we're way over time. And I'm sorry for that, but there were a lot of things that needed to be done today. Okay, so have a good break.